I've tried to come here once before. Jody Picot was speaking, but it was sold out, so it was an authentic case of screw you, and that was it. And it's so gorgeous. I'm just glad I'm not sitting under those things up there, because if they fell, you'd probably be in the hospital. But, you know, that's just the way that I think. So, and we're all having a really good time right now, but sooner or later, you'll all be alone later tonight. It will be dark, and you will go to the bathroom and say, wasn't the shower curtain open? Not to plant ideas in your head. Anyway, okay, so you know what the story's about. Women are going to sleep at this point, and panic is sweeping the country. There's been a riot at the White House, and there is a News America control truck parked nearby so that they can do on-the-scene interviews. And one of our characters, Michaela, is ready to do her stand-up with one of the protesters who got gassed at the White House. So there's Michaela, there is her tech that's running the control board with the cameras, and there's this protester. And one of the things that excited me about the chance to do this book, once you start the idea that women are going to go to sleep, it raises all these questions about the man-woman relationship. You don't have to stand on your soapbox. All you have to do is tell the story, and these things occur naturally, so there's no preaching involved. But one of the things that crossed my mind is that if you have a man and if you have a woman, and they go to the doctor with exactly the same symptoms, a lot of times the man is taken seriously and yet the woman is not. So, I mean, nobody wanted to preach about that, but so Michaela and the tech and the protester are in this control thing, waiting to do their thing, where back in New York at News America headquarters, the anchor, George Alderson, is interviewing a psychiatrist whose name is Erasmus Dipoto. Has there ever been an outbreak like this in the history of the world, Dr. Dipoto? George asked. An interesting question, Dipoto said. He wore round, rimless glasses and a tweed suit that must have been hotter than hell under the lamps. Pro that he was, though, he did not appear to be sweating. Look at that prissy little mouth, Michaela's tech said. If he had to shit out of a hole that small, he'd explode. Michaela laughed heartily. Let's hope you have an interesting answer, George Alderson said. Well, I was thinking of the dancing plague of 1518, Dipoto said. That was also an event that only affected the ladies. The ladies, said a voice from behind Michaela. It was the White House protester who had come over to watch. The ladies, Jesus pleases. That outbreak began with a woman named Mrs. Trofia, who danced madly in the streets of Strasbourg for 6 days and nights, Dipoto said, warming to his subject. Before collapsing, she was joined by many others. This dance mania spread all across Europe. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of women danced in cities and towns. Many died of heart attacks, strokes, or exhaustion. He essayed a small, smug smile. It was simple hysteria, and eventually died out. Are you saying that Aurora is similar? I suspect many of our viewers will find that hard to accept. Michaela was pleased to see that George couldn't keep the disbelief out of his face or his voice. George was mostly blather, but he did have a small, beating newsman's heart somewhere under his Oxford shirt. Sir, we've got news footage of thousands of women and girls with this fibrous material, these cocoons covering their faces and bodies. This is affecting millions of females. I am not making light of the situation by any means, Dipoto said. Absolutely not. But physical symptoms or actual physical changes as a result of mass hysteria are not uncommon. In Flanders, for instance, dozens of women exhibited stigmata, bleeding hands and feet, during the late 18th century. Sexual politics and political correctness aside, I feel we must, That was when Stephanie Koch, the producer of afternoon events, charged onto the set. She was a leathery chain smoker in her 50s who had seen it all and put most of it on television. Michaela would have said Steph was armored against any and all crazy guest opinions, but it seemed her armor had a chink, and Dr. DePoto, with his round spectacles and prissy little mouth, had found it. "What the fuck are you talking about, you penis-equipped gerbil?" she shouted. "I have 2 granddaughters with that shit growing all over them. They're in comas, and you think that's female hysteria?" George Alderson groped out a restraining hand. Stephanie batted it away. She was crying angry tears as she loomed over Dr. Erasmus DePoto, who was cringing back in his chair and staring up at this lunatic Amazon who had appeared from nowhere. "Women all over the world are struggling not to go to sleep because they're afraid they'll never wake up. And you think that's female hysteria?" Michaela, the tech guy, and the woman from the protest were staring at the monitor, fascinated. "Go to commercial," George called, looking over Stephanie Koch's shoulder. "We just need to take a break, folks. Sometimes things get a little tense. That's live television, though," and Stephanie whirled, looking at the off-camera control booth. "Don't you dare go to commercial. Not until I'm done with this chauvinist piece of shit." She was still wearing her headset. Now she tore it off and began to clobber DePoto with it. When he raised his hands to protect the top of his skull, she slashed at his face. His nose began to bleed. "This is female hysteria," Stephanie shouted, whapping him with her headset. Now the little doctor's mouth was bleeding as well. "This is what female hysteria really looks like, you rutabaga." "Rutabaga," the protester woman said. She began to laugh. Did she just call him a rutabaga? A couple of stagehands rushed out to restrain Stephanie Koch. While they struggled and DePoto bled and George Alderson gaped, the studio disappeared and was replaced by an ad for Semacorp. Oh, who knows? Okay,
Does this work?
Hello, you can hear me now. I feel like Wayne Newton. It's the last one, Owen. I'm sorry.
Points of, one of the things that challenges the collaboration between, he is 70 and I'm 40. So some of the points of reference are pretty different.
That's true.
So, like, one of my jobs.
Who would you be thinking of in this, like Justin Bieber?
Yeah, exactly. No, one of my jobs in writing, one of my editing jobs on this book was, he would have like the cool young kids would be like, listening to Lawrence Welk, Wayne Newton, on their iPods, and I had to fix that stuff. So, anyway, right? The idea of Sleeping Beauties was just a one-sentence premise that I had, one afternoon in 2014, 2015, I'm not even sure when. And it was, what if one day all the women in the world didn't wake up? And I thought, it's a great premise, and the ramifications would be so horrible. It was hard for me to wrap my mind around, but I knew that it would be awful. And I thought of my dad right away. And so I was a little bit reluctant to bring the idea to him because that's not something we do. Growing up, I've been witness across these years to countless interactions. Strangers are almost always wandering up to him 2-3 times a day saying, "Hey King, I got your next novel for you right here." And, it'll be a story about the guy like getting sour milk or something. He'll go and go to the bathroom at Fenway, and somebody will sidle up to him at the next urinal and be like, "Steve, I got a novel I want you to write." So I was pretty reluctant to bring it to him, but I did think it was a good idea. And so I called him one night and I said, Dad, here's my idea. And he said, I love that. And I said, great, you go ahead and write it. And he said, no, I couldn't do that. It's too good an idea. You have to write it. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I want you to do it. And we went back and forth for quite a long time, weeks, really months. And finally we ended up compromising and writing the book. So Dad, how did we do that? Can you tell us?
First of all, I would have felt like a real scuzz taking that idea because it was so good. I mean, to me, the situation just called out to be written. And I thought to myself, you know, I've had some other stories where I thought there was a situation that would actually be like a locomotive that would pull the engine of the story. There was one called Cell where I felt that way, and there was another one called Cujo where I felt that way. And this story, man, just seemed like a natural. And so I wanted Owen to do it because I didn't want to steal the idea from him. So we went back and forth about that, as he said, and finally agreed that we would collaborate. And when Owen said he would collaborate with me, you know, I was thrilled because it's true that a lot of kids follow in their parents' footsteps. Then there are even more that absolutely run the other way, that don't want anything to do with it. So I was flattered that he would agree to try the voyage with me. Neither one of us knew that if it would work, but you know, a collaboration is like a marriage, and nobody's sure of that either. You just take the leap and you hope for the best. So the first thing we tried to do was...
We're book married.
We are book married. Owen suggested that we try it as a limited TV show because there have been some things that we really liked for long-form TV, like Breaking Bad, and then The Handmaid's Tale came along. There was a bunch of other stuff. And we did about an episode and a half, and then he said, you know what, this is really not working because I feel, you know, kind of cramped, right?
A little bit rushed, too,
Yeah,
you know, because
yeah.
we had like turned the volume up to 10. You know, right at the beginning it was all action.
It was, and there didn't seem to be any time to just stop and take a breath. So I said, why don't we try it as a novel? And Owen agreed to that. So then there was a question about how you're going to collaborate. There are different people who collaborate in different ways, and we decided that we were going to split the writing 50-50 right down the middle. And the way we were going to work is we were going to go back and forth, but in order to try and make a third voice, a smooth thing, so people wouldn't feel like going over speed bumps, like, oh, here's Steve, oh, there's Owen. Everything just went to hell. Everything just went to hell. So we thought that we would try to create a third voice, you know, that was not either one of us. And to that end, we tried to write, I think, a little bit outside our comfort zone,
yeah.
Right? And also, we left these empty white spaces. If I wrote 25 or 26 pages, there would be a couple of incidents that were related. And in the middle of those incidents that were related, there would be something that was really tough to write that I didn't really want to try. And so I'd leave a blank space and say, Owen, this is for you. Do this shit and that shit and the other shit. And then I'll do some more.
Yeah.
Okay?
And vice versa. I did the same thing for him.
Yeah.
I would always leave these holes. The idea was to, you know, for me to be able to take ownership of his writing and for him to be able to take ownership of my writing, because that's really, I think, at the heart of a good collaboration, is that you're totally working together across the whole thing. And I do think the result, for better or for worse, hopefully for better, is that you can't tell who wrote what. I think people feel a natural temptation to try, but we knew that you would, and that's why we had to stop you.
But the thing is, I know that from experience, that people who come to hear a reading or to see writers, and we thank you very much for coming out and supporting us, because this is terrific. I mean, it's wonderful.
There's even fish here.
Yeah.
This is our first event with
It's a little
fish.
bit scary just because there's people up in the balcony. It's a little bit like being, you know, a Christian in the pit. Waiting for the lions. But, you know, there are people here who write, who are trying to write, who aspire to write, and I can tell you from personal experience that we're all amateurs when we do this. Nobody knows a secret way in, do they, Owen?
No.
And you write this, we wrote this book on spec. We didn't have a contract for it. We didn't know what to expect. And to get to this point, it's just been fabulous.
No, I don't want to speak for him. I think he feels the same way.
You better not.
I love the book. I'm proud of the book. But for me, the most special thing about this was that I am 40 and he is 70. And one thing you don't get to do when you're an adult and you've got your own family like I do, and you live in a different state, and I see my parents 4 or 5 times a year. We talk pretty frequently, but you don't get to have the kind of communication that we got to have to write this book very often. That's a really lucky thing to, as an adult, get to basically have a year-long conversation, you know,
and
with your dad.
It was an intense period while we worked on this book, and you know, we both came to it and said, we don't know, the idea is really good, and so we're going to try our asses off to try and make it the best book that we can. There was no phoning it in. We agreed on that.
Yeah. Hey, will you tell them about our first collaboration?
Oh man, yeah, well, all right.
What you remember?
Yeah,
I'll chime in if you get the details wrong.
Well,
I know you're getting up there.
I'm getting I don't know, I think you were 8 or 9. We were in the backyard. We were cross-country skiing, you know, puffing along through the backyard. And mostly it was to get the dog to get some exercise, because the dog would chase along behind us. And, you know, we talk about stuff out there. And Owen was crazy at that time about G.I. Joe action figures. And he said, you know, if you could create any kind of G.I. Joe, what kind of G.I. Joe would you create, you know? And I said, man, I don't know, because I was hip to it because they wanted the comic books, they wanted the figures, they wanted the TV show. So, you know, I knew more about G.I. Joes than I had ever really wanted to know. But you're all familiar with that. If you have kids, you get familiar with a lot of shit that you could have done without very easily. You know the ins and outs of Dora the Explorer and all her friends and all that stuff. So I said, well, it would be great to have like a G.I. Joe, or maybe I said a Cobra guy, who could read minds. Do you want to tell the rest of this?
Well, I think you said to me, I think I said you should make a Cobra interrogator. That was my contribution to the collaboration.
Yeah, that's right. And then I said,
if
you said read minds, he would be one hell of an interrogator, right?
And I think I said, great, that sounds good. And, you know, I was 8, so I left it at that. But he, you know, we cross-country skied for a while longer, got the dogs exercise, and then he went inside, and unbeknownst to me, wrote up his G.I. Joe. And
our G.I.
Joe, wrote up our G.I. Joe, and sent a letter to Hasbro and said, here's my idea. And they said, cool. And they made it. And then the next thing that I knew, we got a box of G.I. Joes. They paid, I think in some ways that's like the worst part of the story is that they paid him in G.I. Joes. And the character's name was Crystal Ball.
Right.
And he was the Cobra interrogator.
Right, and wasn't his real name like Owen?
No, what they did, the other part of the payment was there was a good guy whose whose real name is Sneak Peek. He's like the Cobra. I mean the G.I. Joe.
Right.
Like
you didn't want to have his own name after you.
And his name is Owen King, and he's from Bangor.
And probably really nobody gives a shit about that story, but we think it's cute. So.
I think it's pretty cute. So,
but I knew we could collaborate after that.
Yeah,
right?
it was just we were waiting for the right moment. You've written, I think it's 57 novels now.
Well, something like that.
Published.
Bunch of them.
57 published novels, scripts, a G.I. Joe,
right? A comic book,
comic books. A lot of graffiti.
I even directed a movie, well, they call it that. It was maximum overdrive.
So what's
Not my finest hour, but I was drinking a lot then.
What's the one thing that you didn't know when you published the first book, Carrie, the most important thing you've learned since then about writing? Because a lot of people like the book. A lot of people say, hey, he had it from the beginning.
Well, I think the most important thing that I learned was to ask for more money. No. No. The most important thing, I think in terms of what I wanted from the job from the very beginning was to be able to support myself and my family and continue to do something that I loved. At the time that Carrie sold, I was teaching school, and we were living in a very bad apartment in Bangor, Maine, and we didn't have a telephone because we just couldn't afford it. And I came home one day and I had a couple of credit cards, and my wife said, give me your wallet. And I gave her my wallet, and she took out those credit cards, which were given out free at that time, and she cut them up with clippers. And I said, why did you do that? And she said, because we can't afford the interest, which was very smart on her part. I think that when you pay cash, when you have to actually look at money, sometimes you hesitate a little bit. But in any case, the advance was $2,500. We were able to trade a car where the transmission was falling apart for one that was a little bit better. And that was what I expected, really, from it. And I got a call from my editor, and my wife had gone up to see her folks in a town nearby. And my editor said, we sold the paperback rights to your book. And I said, well, how much did you get? He said, are you sitting down? And I said, no, I can stand up. And he said, we got $400,000. And my legs went out from under me. And I sat down on the floor and I said, you said $40,000, didn't you? He said, no, $400,000. I'm living in this cheap, shitty apartment, $90 a month and a couple upstairs fights, and and I can't believe it. And I don't know what to do. I can't tell my wife because she's taken, our infant daughter up to see her mom, and I'm in the house by myself. It's Sunday. My editor called me on a Sunday, so I went downtown. I said, I gotta buy her a present. And so I walked downtown, and the only thing that was open in downtown Bangor was the Rexall drugstore. So I bought my wife a hairdryer. It was the only thing I could think of. But I think that the most important thing that I learned from the whole process of those years was to never stop trying to do the best you can, be brave, tell the truth, and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, for me, I like to tell a good story, and I like to take people away and make them enjoy things, but that's about it. That's all I know. Why don't you tell these people about...
Shock me with a new question. I know the question you're about to ask.
Shock you with a new question?
Well, don't shock me, but just ask me a new question. Look at your magic file. We've been trying to ask each other one new question every night, and we gave up a couple nights ago. But so I'm going to put the pressure on him right now. Let's ask me something new, and I'll not give a shitty answer.
What's it been like to be on tour, first with your father, and to be faced with, what have we talked to at this point? About 20,000 people, I think. So what's that been like?
Well, I'll get to that, but I want to tell you that one of the things I always...
Nice one, I like
I'm
that.
going to get to that. I'm glad you asked.
Would you like to run for Congress?
Yeah.
How about president?
One of the questions I always get is, and I've been getting it since I was a kid, is people will say to me, they'll get this goony look on their face, and they'll be like, what kind of stories your dad tell you at bedtime? And it's totally, it's obvious that they think that he read me Ann Rule books or autopsy reports. And, you know, but he didn't. He just read me, you know, totally normal Judy Blume, Lois Lowry books.
Richard Scarry, man, I hated those books.
Yeah.
So always be, you know, all these things that my kids say, where's the rabbit on this one, Dad? You know, I'm like, fuck the rabbit, go to bed.
Well, what's it been like? You know, so we've traveled. I mean, we've traveled thousands of miles in the last 10 days. We've traveled thousands of miles, and we've spoken before thousands of people. And I think that what I've mostly been the incredibly heartening thing is that we've spoken to so many people that are so excited about books. I mean, he'll say a title, you know, he'll say Children of the Corn, and everybody will go, yeah, fucking A, you know, and like there's
well, maybe not that one.
No, but people are so enthusiastic about books, and I you don't necessarily I don't expect that. I had no I did not anticipate like roaring enthusiasm for our discussion about our various discussions about writing process and stories, and so that part has been wonderful, and in much the same way that the writing of the book was this very pleasant, peaceable experience where we had, you know, even when we disagreed about something, it was always like, oh, well, if that doesn't work for him, then we're gonna have to figure out some other way to do this. And if it doesn't work for me, we're gonna figure out some other way to do this, and we always did. And it's just been, I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad we did it too. When Owen said this thing about, well, what if all the women in the world went to sleep? The first thing that flashed through my mind was something that my mother used to say. She used to say, if all the women disappeared, every man would look like hell because there isn't one of them knows how to iron a shirt. Okay? And then I thought from microcosm to macrocosm, from the small to the big, and it opened up all these possibilities. And the actual writing of the story from that was pure pleasure for me. And there were so many different things to think about. And like I say, the most important thing was that we didn't have to get up on a soapbox and preach about it. You know, when we started this book, Owen said to me, well, what if we have this little town and we set it somewhere in Appalachia, and then we have one of these private prisons in this town. It's a women's prison. And what if we make that like the centerpiece of the story? So that seemed like a good idea. And so we needed some hands-on experience. So we got a good friend, Russ Dorr, who had contacts with a judge in New Hampshire, and she arranged for us to tour the New Hampshire Correctional Facility for Women. And the overriding feeling that we got there was one of sadness. These didn't seem like bad women. They seemed like women who had been, you know, kind
through a lot.
Yeah, who had just, like Tiffany and the part that Owen read, who just sort of been almost like cattle in a chute, and that was where they ended up. Anyway, they had 3 different divisions of the prison. There was the A block, where they put women that are getting ready to get out on a limited release, or they finish their sentences, or they're women who have psychological problems. That's why we made a shrink, one of the characters. And then there's B wing, where most of the women go to do their time. And then there was C wing, where the bad ladies go, the ones who are a real problem. And we got some hands-on experience about what it is to, and again, the difference between women and men. And again, when they're incarcerated, if a man is able to go over the wall or go under the fence, they head for the hills. When a woman escapes a woman's facility, they go home. They want to see their kids. So it was a learning experience for us.
And that was the start of the book, really. I mean, we decided we wanted to write the story, and we went and visited the prison.
And everything else,
here we are now.
And everything else sort of happened, I think, along with the you know, I don't want to get political, and we didn't get that in the book, but along with the Republican majorities and with the election of Donald Trump as president, and you know, when we were in the process of rewriting this book, Mitch McConnell actually gave us one of the epigrams when he was talking about Elizabeth Warren. He said,
she was warned.
Right?
Nevertheless, she persisted.
Nevertheless, she persisted. We made it, you know.
So, before we take questions from you guys, this is every night on the tour. I have been working with him with this book called the Stephen King Quiz Book that has come in my possession. And when you get to his advanced years,
go on, stick it to me.
Yep.
It's the last time. You might as well do a good job.
So we want to just strengthen up the memory banks. And I should say that when I started, I would ask him a biographical question every night, and I asked him where he was born and where he went to college and the names of his children. And he got almost all those right. But you got to see the situation, and I know that he knows what I'm going to say here. Today, when we were flying home from Canada, I fell asleep, and he filled out my customs form for me, which was very nice. But
see, this is the thing about a writer. They will tell you everything.
My middle name is Philip. He gave it to me, and it's got 2 L's, and he put just 1 in. I mean, this is why we have to do this. So I've been asking him questions about a different book every night. This is the last night, so we're going to go.
I changed his diapers, okay?
Yeah.
I changed his diapers.
It's the last night, so we've done a different book every night. He did great with The Dead Zone. You did great last night with Firestarter.
What did I do?
Firestarter, you killed. But he was really bad on Eyes of the Dragon and on Christine.
Bad.
Really did bad.
But I was drinking a lot when I wrote that book.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to do The Stand for our final. All right. 4 questions to glory, Dad. 4 questions to glory. Handpicked.
Are they fair?
I think they're pretty fair, actually. What was the real name of the trash can man?
Wait. No, that was Trashy. He had 3 names. Donald Merwin Elbert.
You got it! All right.
I pulled that out of my ass, man.
I think you'll get this one. What was the name of the killer flu?
Well, it was the super flu, right?
Yeah, but what else did they call it? It had a special name.
Captain Trips.
That's right. I think this is the hard one, okay?
That was named after a rock song. It went, Ride, Captain, Ride upon your mystery ship.
I think this is the hard one of the night. You ready?
It's a little inside.
Number 3 is, what was the name of Larry Underwood's band? It's a pretty good name.
The Rock Bottom Remainders.
Do you want to get?
Wait, that was a joke.
Someone will know this one if we have to take the
No,
audience.
I don't know.
And what is it? Tattered Remnants. That's
The
Tattered Remnants.
Tattered
Close.
Remnants. Good one on you.
Yep. All right, last question. How does Tom Cullen spell Stephen King?
What?
How does Tom Cullen spell Stephen King?
M-O-O-N. That
That's
spells
right.
Stephen King. Excellent.
That was good. 3 out of 4 is good. So I guess we'll take some questions from the audience now if you guys have some
Go
questions.
ahead. I mean, if it's really...
We will
if it's
decide.
really embarrassing, we just won't answer it.
Well, let's just.
Or we will.
How about this young lady with the pink camera phone? If it's we have to warn you. If it's a question we don't like, we just won't answer it. But, so it better be good.
Talking to you?
No pressure. Wonderful.
Great.
Let's give her a hand. We love. Did you listen to Maren Ireland's reading? Oh, was so good, right? Yeah, she's really
Marin
good.
Ireland read it. She did a great job with it. Yeah. Well, I was raised by a single mom in the years before single moms were a thing, and she worked a lot of menial jobs to support us uncomplainingly. Her husband ran out on her and left her with 2 little boys, and she did the right thing. And she worked as a baker's assistant, she worked as a waitress, she worked in a wet wash, laundry, and she made us behave. She made us behave. And then I married a strong woman, Tabitha, my wife, who's also written 9 books, so these kids come by from both sides of the family. She's got 5 sisters. She had a wonderful, strong mother and a foul-mouthed grandmother. I'll just tell you one story about her grandmother, and that is that when Tabby and I were young marrieds, and we had 2 kids, Owen hadn't come along yet, but we would go from our place in Western Maine up to Old Town, Maine, outside of Bangor, where her folks lived and her grandmother lived. Grandmother was this scrawny woman who always had a Herbarian hanging out from the corner of her mouth, and she had no sympathy for men. Her husband died of lung cancer, and in his last extremity, she was wanting to say, "Al, stop that goddamn coughing." This is so cruel. But I came in and I had everything. It was the playpen, it was the Pampers, it was all the bags that the kids had with the clothes and everything else. And Hattie White said to me, she said, if you stuck a broom up your ass, you could sweep the floor as you went. I've been surrounded by women. Most of the people who've worked with me as editors have been women, and I come by that naturally without any preaching or anything. It wasn't anything that I had to be dragged to. What about you?
Yeah, and I think that the story is the story. It would be a lie to say it's not reflective of our worldview, but that's not, you don't write a story to say, I'm going to make this point. You follow it where it's going to take you. And so all those things that, it bothers some people, there's no doubt about it, but all that stuff, it came organically to us, and the way that the men behave in the book and the way that the women behave in the book, they behave that way because that's the way we thought the characters would act. It wasn't a contrived construction. That's just the way it went, and if people can take it as however they want. That's one thing I should say that you get used to when you start to publish books, is that as soon as it hits the paper and heads to a bookstore or a library, it doesn't belong to you anymore.